Okay, welcome everybody. We are happy to see you here to this ENSMOV workshop dedicated to the IT tools used for energy efficiency policies. I'm Dario Di Santo, Managing Director of FIRE, the Italian Federation for the Rational Use of Energy, and I will chair this workshop that I hope will be useful for you. Please feel free to ask all the questions you want through the question panel in the control panel or GoToWebinar. All the presentations will be made available on the ENSMOV website, so ensmov.eu. And of course, we will also try to work in case there will be not much time to answer all the questions, to collect some answers from the speakers and share them with you in the following days. So I don't want to waste time, and I pass the floor to Ivana Rogli, who will say you some words about the ENSMOV project. Ivana, the floor is yours.
Okay, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Dario. On my behalf and the behalf of Latis Soikonemo, who is the project coordinator, I'm just going to tell you a few words, not to waste a lot of your time into the introduction process, since I know that you are very keen on knowing what we have for the presentation on the IT tools. So the ENSMOV project is being implemented since June 2019, and our goal is to share knowledge on the implementation of Article 7, both alternative policies and energy efficiency obligation scheme, but also monitoring, reporting, and verification tools and knowledge among the national authorities and all the other interested stakeholders, so the obligatory parties and so on. Also, our goal is to work beyond this period of the project implementation and to create something that would be sustainable and useful afterwards. So the materials and also the platform that I'm going to tell you a bit more about later on, which serves as a knowledge repository for the topic of the energy efficiency policies and energy efficiency market, let's say, knowledge and ideas. We are 15 partners which are represented in the consortium, and we are covering all the states. So we are both the member states and the associated countries. Wanting to share the knowledge on the energy efficiency directive implementation and Article 7 in particular on the broader scope than just the European Union, since the associated countries are also the ones that are implementing energy efficiency directive. You can see a bit more on the consortium and all the partners that are here. We consist of both institutes and consulting companies, so those who are working directly with policies, but also our partnership as regional energy, national energy agencies, national authorities who are in charge of energy efficiency directive implementation. Since we wanted to kind of connect the knowledge that's working top down and the one that's working directly with the implementation, to be able to create the materials that will be useful for a long period of time and for most of the EU and the associated countries. So what we do, our concept is consisting of 4 segments. In the beginning of the project, we did a needs and gaps analysis, trying to figure out what is that concerning national authorities in the implementation of Article 7. Then to share experiences, and also, as I said, to create the knowledge that is going to be used later on, and all of this in 2 axes, so the policies, the energy efficiency policies related to Article 7 EED, and also the MRV schemes. and a bit more about all of these segments. So at the beginning of the project, which is we have 3 cycles. We decided we have 3 cycles, and that each cycle would be the one that is going a bit more deep into details of the implementation of the policies and the MRV. So in the first one, we were mostly concentrated on the issues that came up first. So those that are bothering a lot of countries and that are linked like the, let's say, overall implementation legislative framework related to Article 7 and to obligations. But then we wanted to go a bit more in depth, and you are now part of the cycle 2, which is dealing more with the practical aspects of the implementation of Article 7, and one of them, of course, is the IT tools that are used for MRV. And also we had in this second cycle a workshop on the step-by-step approach for setting and developing and modifying the MRV schemes. And you will be able to join us in the next period, in mostly in September, in additional workshops on how Article 7 will be influenced by the new climate policy and Fit for 55 package, and how it will going to influence the implementation, but also the reporting of the savings and the achievement of the savings also. Also a bit more on additionality and materiality, which have been topics of our work even in the first cycle, but we are we will now try to concentrate on the knowledge exchange, on the issues that countries are facing when reporting additionality and materiality and trying to prove them. And afterwards, during autumn and winter, we will invite you to join us in the knowledge exchange on the energy efficiency fund setting up, since you are probably familiar with the fact that some of the countries are financing and implementing their alternative policies through the Energy Efficiency Fund, and some are just in the setting up process. How are the banks and the financial institutions financing energy efficiency measures, and how the side effects and multiple benefits of the EEOs are influencing the market, and what are the multiple benefits and the side effects, and a bit more about the ESCOs and the energy performance contracts, so the ways the market work regarding energy efficiency alternative measures and EOs. We have developed a lot of materials. I will not tell you a lot about that, because you can reach all of that through our Article 7 EED platform, the link to which I will show you at the end of the presentation. But we are trying to combine the workshops and the materials, which are, some of them are broad and are relevant for all the countries and all the stakeholders that are involved, but some of them are very much specific, and those are like the one you can see at the screen at the moment. For example, the specificities and challenges that the fuel suppliers are facing when they are going to have to achieve their energy efficiency obligation target. And for example, we're also trying to update what we are working on due to the circumstances. So you can see also that we've been trying to evaluate how COVID crisis has influenced the investments in the energy efficiency and the implementation of the legislation framework. And we did it through a survey and a workshop and interactions, and you can also see it and see the possible consequences of the rebound effects that we've evaluated through our work. Other than that, you can see we did a lot of different workshops. So we are working on a national level, trying to figure out the specific challenges that the countries are facing, but also, as you are witnessing today, the EU level workshops, the regional workshops, and the webinars, the knowledge sharing webinars, and they're all also available in a recording on our platform. So if you've missed some of the topics that I've mentioned earlier, you can check them on the link. these are the ones that I've mentioned that are happening in the next period of time. So you can follow us, our newsletter and the website, so you can join us for the future events. Here is a bit of an insight into the platform. I think other than a lot of learning materials that we are gathering, not only from our project, but also from the all related projects that we are cooperating with, you can also, I think, two interesting things are also available on the platform. One of them is the fact that you can find country-specific data, and not only the data, but you can also find a country-specific expert. So you can find a person from our consortium who is in charge of doing the work for the specific country, and ask that person directly a question about the issues that you're facing in your member state. And you can also usually find the contact of the national authority who is in charge of the implementation of the Article 7. So you can contact, if needed, the national authority. Other than that, we have several means of communication, the forum, the LinkedIn group, and so on. So if you have some very direct questions that have not been covered through the workshops, you can also contact us like that. For the next period of time, other than what I've mentioned earlier, so the knowledge exchange, we are now working on the policies. So the synthesis of the policy outcomes, the replication of the capacity building, so broadening of what we've done to the other countries that have not been involved. And I guess what is most relevant, we are gathering all these inputs that we get from the attendees and from the work and the desktop research that we are doing, and trying to influence the recommendations for the policy implementation for the next period, especially in this period of time when there are a lot of legislative changes happening from the perspective of energy efficiency and climate change. Thank you very much. Thank you for attention. If you have any questions either about the project or our next events or the plans that we are having, you can contact either Vlasis or myself, or you can use any of the communication channels that you can see on this slide. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ivana. So follow us on the website, on the knowledge exchange platform, on the social networks, and we have a lot of activities ongoing, and I think they will be helpful for you. So now let's introduce the topic of today's webinar, so the role of IT tools in energy policies, together with Timo Liederer from the Austrian Energy Agency. Please, Timo. You are muted.
Okay, now it works, I hope so. Yeah, okay. Thanks for the introduction, Dario, and thanks, Ivana, for the introduction of the ENSMOV project. I will give you a short overview on the role of IT tools in the energy efficiency policies. I hope you can see my presentation. I will make it short because the following presentations are a bit more detailed on the specific IT tools used in the countries. So yeah, let's start. So what are the benefits of IT tools within energy policies? Most importantly, they simplify the data collections, and both for the obligated parties and for the administrative bodies. It also makes the analysis easier, and it helps to automate the monitoring process. The administrative burden is reduced, so it can reduce the overall costs, but this depends on a few factors like the number of obligated parties, if the implementation of the online database is too expensive, maybe because there are only a few big obligated parties that you can handle without an IT tool. But in most cases, especially for EEOs, it reduces the administrative burden and the costs overall, and it helps to secure the data because there's a lot of sensitive data, and if you implement the online database correctly, then it helps with securing this data. So when are IT tools useful? Like I said before, of course, if you have a high number of reporting parties, then it reduces the costs, because it would be too time consuming to do it without an online tool. The second point, lack of expertise. I mean, there are a lot of cases where the person of a obligated party who is in charge of, like, for example, reporting measures, isn't an expert on the field. And if you do plan the IT tool correctly and make it user friendly, then it helps those people to enter the data without a lot of mistakes. So this can really help with good IT tools. As I said, if you need analyses, then it's really a good way to do it with IT tools, but you have to really be careful before implementing it, that you plan exactly what kind of data you need and you want for analysis. And of course, as I said before, it helps to automate the monitoring process. So if that's what you're looking for, then IT tools are very useful. A few recommendations. If you're planning to implement an IT tool, an online database, as I said right before, plan ahead. It's really important to know exactly what data you need, how the data is entered, and how you need it afterwards to do analysis, etc. So define the data collection process and define the monitoring and verification process, because it really have to be in line with the IT tool, that you don't miss on data, or you don't have data you would need to analyze the outcome. As I mentioned in the beginning, data security, you have to guarantee it. Possibilities of analysis, I already mentioned that, and it's really important that it is user friendly, as I said, because if people report to measures that aren't experts on the field, and the T tool isn't user friendly, then it's way too difficult, and you will got a lot of problems, and you can't really change that afterwards. So what do you have to keep in mind if you want to implement an IT tool? Don't underestimate the costs. The implementation is really expensive, and also the maintenance of it. And if you don't plan correctly, there might don't be a chance to change things afterwards, or they are very expensive. But some things you can't change afterwards, so you really plan ahead. So that was just a really quick introduction on IT tools, and the more detailed information on the IT tools used from our partners in different countries will follow now. And there are my contact information, and yeah, that's it. Thanks for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Timo. So let's dive into some case studies together with our speakers that I wish to thank for their availability, and also wish to thank all the attendants, because you are numerous despite being late July. So the first case study is from Austria, and Elizabeth Burke will show us. Please.
Okay. Is the presentation already visible? Okay.
Share screen. Yeah. Okay.
Now okay, then. I'm sorry, there's some problems with this. Oh, it should be working. Good morning from my side as well. I'm sorry, I'm still having a few difficulties with
We
the doc.
we see the first slide, the cover.
Okay, then everything is fine. Good morning from my side. I will be presenting a short case on the Austrian IT tool. So it's called the Online Application for the Energy Efficiency Act. I have been working for Austrian Energy Agency and, to be in more detail, for the National Energy Efficiency Monitoring Agency. So the agency responsible of the monitoring and verification of the implementation in Austria since 2015. Maybe as a short overview on the construct of responsible parties within Austria, our Federal Ministry of Climate Action is the responsible public authority. And as already explained, Austrian Energy Agency is the National Energy Efficiency Monitoring Agency. As this presentation is about IT tools, I would also like to mention the Austrian Federal Computing Center, who prepared our application. And within this application, basically all the monitoring and verification activities are done. So obligated parties are reporting their implemented actions, as well as public authorities. So in our cases, mostly funding bodies, as well as the federal governances. Energy consuming enterprises have to report their audits via the IT tool, and energy service providers, in case they want to be listed in the official list of energy service providers, have to register as well. So our database is an e-government application. In order to get access to it, the company has to register at the National Energy Efficiency Monitoring Agency and at our e-government platform, so the Austrian e-government platform, which is called Unternehmensserviceportal. And then each person who wants to interact has to get a handy signature, which is a digital identification. So this is quite a complicated access process, but on the same time, this means that we can log who did changes at what time. So in case there are some legal problems, or in case something is unclear, we are provided with information on who changed this at what time. So why did we opt for e-government? Mostly because, of course, the data we collect for the Article 7 implementation is sensible data, as it is both personal data of people logging into our system, as well as company confidentially, and also for reasons of data security, because you have to keep in mind that you are collecting a lot of data that is not supposed to get to the public. So due to this multiple levels of security, you can make sure that everything is compliant. The measures are reported via online forms, and I'm going to show you give you a short insight into those reporting forms. So among other points on the left relevant for reporting, there's the reporting of measures, so Maßnahmen. There are about 250 different options of forms to be chosen. Most of them about deemed savings measures that have been prepared in the Austrian catalog, and also an individualized reporting form in case no deemed savings measures are available. So the reporting form itself has a few general questions, like the name of the beneficiary, reporting the action, the date of implementation of the action, the address of implementation, what energy carrier has been reduced by implementing this action. Then there is an upload function for evidence, so which will later be needed for verification. And users can also already imply if a subsidy has been used to implement this action. Then there's a second section in the reporting form about which is action specific. So this will vary depending on what form you're actually using. This is about what type of appliance was implemented, what number of appliances has been newly installed or replaced, what is the performance of those appliances, and what are the operating hours. Or, of course, this will depend on the measure itself. Then users can click on calculate, and the application will already show them the energy savings achieved when reporting this measure. So what are the rules about reporting? The reporting infrastructure is used both by obligated parties and public authorities, so both within our EO as well as the alternative measures are reported here. However, we only control energy efficiency measures that are reported by obligated parties. In case non-obligated parties implement a measure, they can either sell it within the same year to an obligated party, or they can bank, so store this measure. In that case, they have to report it within the reporting deadlines and can sell it to obligated parties on the market in the following years. So also energy efficiency measures can be divided, which is relevant to companies storing or banking such measures. So in case they only want to sell a small portion, they can do so. So they can divide it up into a small portion and only sell this small portion. Additionally, in case an obligated party reports more measures than needed for within 1 year, then this overfulfillment can be transferred to the following years. Then regarding the data control for the verification process, like I already explained, the required data is reported via the online database. And in Austria, we do not perform any pre-checks, so measures are only controlled and verified after they have been reported. There is a 3-step evaluation of the measures. At first, there are plausibility checks, which are performed for all input data, and because of this, automated to a large extent. So this is mostly done on the reports we get from our database, and also double counting is checked here. Then for a representative sample, we do in-depth checks, which is more or less checking the calculation and if the methodology used is correct, and evaluate based on paper files, or rather paper or digital files, whether everything is okay and if everything has been reported correctly. Additionally, for about 25 days per year, we do on-site checks. So we really go to the implementers of the action and check if everything was done as reported. So regarding the monitoring and verification success factors, in our opinion, one thing we can definitely say that is helping with monitoring and verification is that standardized reporting procedures and templates are very helpful, because it's easier to automate over standardized templates than rather having people looking at every single document. Also, it is important to implement clear and transparent rules and even more important, also adequately communicate this to all actors, to prepare a clear definition of what is eligible, so what measures can be reported, what cannot be reported or will not be accepted by the monitoring body. And this also includes a clear definition of how the evaluation of measures will take place and what documentation is the obligated party needs to provide in order to get a positive check of the measure. Another option that proves quite easy, both from verification and point of view of a monitoring body, as well as from the obligated party's point of view, is to use default evaluation values for standard measures, especially in households, as usually there is a good chance to standardize values and via deemed savings approaches. Additionally, in Austria, for example, it is the case that if obligated parties want to step away from these default values, they have to give a good reason on why they are doing so. Another important thing is the introduction of a paperless process. I mean, it should be quite clear in the year 2021, but still it reduces time of postal service, time of waiting for documents to be sent. And of course, to make verification easier and faster as well, doing in-depth checks on paper or e-files instead of on-site checks, because this just takes a lot more time. And of course, the automation of the monitoring process. So using databases definitely makes sense here. When setting up an IT tool, we recommend that even at the beginning, when the first concept stage, design a very precise concept of all the functionalities and all the data you want to collect up front, because later on changes are usually way harder to implement or way more expensive to implement. Also, what should not be underestimated is that both defining this concept as well as the programming of the application itself have long preparation times. And additionally, it will take some time to inform obligated parties about how to use it, how to gain access to it, how to use the different functionalities and so on. Also, more features of an online application can reduce the data input and data control enormously, even if it's just really small things like obligated parties reporting very similar measures each year, giving them the option to copy it or copy an old measure and then including the new data was actually really appreciated by all parties reporting. Another option, or another important point is that trying to centralize the platform as much as possible. So if you already have it, don't only use it for your EO, but rather also includes the public authorities reporting alternative measures, because that way you have conformed data that you can check or can collect reports from. So digitalize as much as possible and digitalize in the same platform. Another option which has not been implemented in Austria but would be welcome, I guess, by all public authorities and also by stakeholders having to report different regulations, is use synergies to create common interfaces for various environmental policies. So example, combine this with market surveillance or CO2 or renewables reporting, as this will definitely decrease the burden for all parties that have to report for more than one of those policies. So what is our experience with building up and then maintaining our MOE application? The benefits are definitely the high data security due to the e-government application, the conformity of the data reported. So those automated reports really make it easier to check. Then a high level of detail in the reported data, which both helps with better verification and use the data for other uses, like, for example, statistical purposes. Then there's real-time feedback on target fulfillment for the obligated parties, so they actually see after reporting a measure how much they still have to report. And of course, it reduces the manual workload. As I already said, there are processes that can be automated. The disadvantages are definitely that this application had really high investment costs and a long time of preparation. And due to it offering all these functionalities, it is quite complex and actually needed a manual prepared for all users depending on what they are planning to do or supposed to do there. So this is about energy service providers, what they have to report, what has been done has to be done in order to report an audit, and also what are obligated parties supposed to do within our tool. That's it from my side for now. In case you have questions, I think there's something jumping in the chat.
Okay, thank you very much, Elizabeth. We will answer the questions afterward in the discussion part. There are already 2 questions for you, so in the meantime, you can read them in the chat. And we go on with the next presentation by Lovorko Maric from Croatia, so that we will see another example of application of IT tools. Lovorko.
Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me and see me.
Yeah, perfect.
Do you see my presentation? Yeah.
Yes, perfect.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Lovorko Maric from the Energy Efficiency Department at the Energy Institute Hrvoje Požar in Zagreb, Croatia. And I'm going to present you the Croatian IT tool, System for Monitoring and Verification of Energy Savings, well known by the acronym ENSMOV. So ENSMOV has been developed through a regional cooperation project implemented by GIZ through the Open Regional Fund for Energy Efficiency. I think it is convenient that we continue on after the Austrian presentation, because I think the Austrian system has been a benchmark for ENSMOV in many ways. ENSMOV has been used since 2015. Since then, it has been updated several times. The newest and thorough update has been conducted in 2020. From 19 to 33 measures are now in ENSMOV from 19, which was before the newest update. Some of the new features, which I will also show later on, are transfer of savings, stimulation of energy poverty related measures. For example, if measures are implemented in endangered households or in poor areas, higher savings are accounted from 10 to 30%. Also, primary energy savings are introduced, non-functioning yet, but will be in the future. So SMIV is an obligatory tool. It has been embedded in the creation legislation as the national monitoring verification platform. It is obligatory for subsidy providers, for public sector, for obligated parties within the energy efficiency obligation scheme, which was in Croatia initiated in 2019. ESCO companies. The dominant user is the National Energy Efficiency Fund, who is a subsidy provider, and since 2015 till now, it is responsible for approximately 90% of all entries. This may change in the future, especially with the introduction of EEOs in 2019. SMIV is also a database for implemented energy efficiency measures in Croatia. We have now SMIV has now more than 16,000 projects inserted. And it is also a tool for calculation of energy savings, CO2 emission reductions. It also showcases the investment costs of measures. It calculates only new annual savings from a measure. So cumulative savings are not calculated in SMIV. We will explain this also afterwards. So the reporting savings, the annual reporting savings on the national level, which have to be submitted by the 15th of March, which is the responsibility of the competent ministry, the Ministry of Economy and Sustainable Development in Croatia. The reported savings are to be based on data from SMIV, and these are the savings from EEOs, from alternative measures, and the report has to be published on the national website for energy efficiency, or should be published. So the provisions are monitoring, so the processing of data, the collection of information about implemented energy efficiency measures. This includes type of measure, input data for energy saving calculation, cost of implementation, received subsidies, which is important for alternative measures as these are mostly based on subsidy programs. Measurements, so the new annual energy savings are calculated and achieved by EE measures using prescribed methods. So project-specific data is always being used rather than the reference data, which is prescribed in methodology. And for measures for which methods are not prescribed, energy savings should be calculated by authorized design engineers, energy auditors. For example, in the case of public lighting, it should be made by an electrical engineer. Verification, the process of confirming and these energy savings, whether they are authentic and real. This is made by the authorized body, the National Coordination Authority, which is now within the Ministry of Economy and Sustainable Development. This is the interface for SMIV. So here on the upper part, one should log in with a username and a password. And you can see down here, one can select the new implemented measure. One has 3 sectors to choose from: buildings and public lighting, industry, transport. There's also the choice to choose other, which does not belong to these 3 sectors. And then we choose one of the measures, for example, eco-driving or energy renovation of existing buildings. And once we choose this, we go to the next part. This is the energy renovation of existing buildings measure. We have here, title of measure, description, type. We can choose the location depending on the measure. This can give us also the information about the heating degree days, the lifetime of measure. So we have the date of implementation, which is after the measure has been implemented, the starting date, and the lifetime can go, for example, for 25 years. The owner of savings, so the subsidy provider, the public sector representative, inserts here his or her data with a name, email, phone number, and so on. And here are the calculation results, namely the energy savings, kilowatt hour per year, the CO2 emissions in tons, the investment costs in Croatian kuna, and here below is the input data for a collection of savings. The methodology is here, and the reference values, if needed, can be inserted here. And here we have the information on the construction date or construction period, whether these buildings are residential or service, and this can all be inserted here, calculated with this button here. And here are the main results of the energy savings, whether these are energy savings themselves, or CO2 emissions, so the environmental, or the investment cost, the economic side of the saving. Here is the data about co-financing, about information regarding subsidy providers. This is the upload of documents, the proof, the verification, whether these measures have been actually implemented, and that correct data, input data based on authentic and verified and authorized documentation for the calculation of energy savings was used. As I mentioned before, the transfer of savings is a relatively new update. It is important to note that the trading itself happens outside of the system. SMIV is first and foremost a database, and here a contract proving transfer of savings from one obligated party to the other must be delivered and shown here. Here is the interface showing the database of all the different measures. This can be exported to Microsoft Excel for analyses and for subsequent reporting. So all analyses which include the calculation of cumulative savings for evaluation for reporting purposes are not done within SMIV, they are done outside SMIV. SMIV is first and foremost a database, and therefore from an analyst perspective, what are the issues that we can highlight now and which can be improved in the future? For example, it would be convenient for the analysts to group the projects under the same policy measure, since there is currently no unique ID of policy measure for grouping. For example, if we have a policy program, financing program of energy renovation for public sector from 2016 to 2020, it would be prudent to have all these measures within this program, that we can have this simply shown within SMIV to be evaluated and reported afterwards. A more detailed distinction of subsectors and sectors would be needed. For example, households divided into multi-apartment and single family, public sector, whether it is at the national state level or it's at the local level. There are certain entry mistakes which are implemented or inserted into SMIV manually, which could be eliminated by certain field requirements within the system. And there are, as people are differently inserting data in the system, there are different levels of details and description for projects, sometimes also in different categories. For example, title of measure can have a longer description in one case, and description of measure can have the exact description in another case, and so on. The issue of double counting, there is manual control. This is so far controlled manually. There were cases that one project was inserted or put in the system under EEOS and under the alternative measure at the same time, which should be eliminated now by the new regulation on monitoring and verification, which that should be put into practice this year. There are also cases where local authorities often enter projects that received subsidies, and this was already inserted by the aforementioned National Energy Efficiency Fund. And simply for better user friendliness and practicality reasons, group entries needed in case of the so-called mass measures, for example, housing appliances, electric vehicles, even single family houses, and so on. What are the lessons learned? The Article 7 targets, as we probably all know, can be very tough to achieve, but it has become the single most important driver for energy savings. Of course, the M&V system is critical for evaluating the progress, and so, since we are in 2021, a comprehensive, practical IT platform is the best way of collecting all the data. And this has been introduced by SMIV, and subsidy providers such as the National Energy Efficiency Fund is qualified experience for entries. So as they always say, experience is crucial in making this actually work. And obligated parties, on the other hand, that don't have that much experience as the Energy Efficiency Fund, since the system of obligation schemes has been introduced in 2019. There are some struggles, especially for the smaller obligated parties. clearer guidelines are needed, and hopefully there will be some improvement made with the implementation of the new regulation. And as we have noted in the previous slide, in Croatian case, upgrade should be directed towards enabling analytical function, which would facilitate easier reporting. There is also the issue with verification, since all verification is based on documentation. Therefore, there is a lot of paperwork to be submitted, to be archived, and this is often not possible to upload in the system. And this new regulation introduces the report of energy savings, which should have a systematic, thorough representation of savings calculation, which accompanies evidence, proof of authenticity of these energy savings, prepared by authorized experts, whether they are design engineers, energy auditors, and this is expected to improve and facilitate the verification process. And as the main conclusion, the IT tool, in our case ENSMOV, is a comprehensive way of collecting, of interpreting all the data, and possibilities for improvement are existing. They always exist and will be in the future easier to implement, not just because of technology advancement, but also because of accumulated experience. So thank you for your attention, and yeah, if there are questions.
Thank you, Lovorko. I think these first two cases have been really interesting and showing us a lot of points about the implementation, design, management of IT tools. We'll go on with the next case study together with Joe Durkin from SEAI, who will show a case study from Ireland. Joe, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, everybody. Just make sure I can get my. Now, can everybody see my screen?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, just 1 second. Okay. Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm going to just give an overview of our energy credits management system. And essentially, this is the database where we collect and manage all of our verified energy savings. So we also have measurement and verification processes, but I'm not going to go into them in too much detail today. Just a very brief overview of our obligation scheme. We have 11 obligated parties. They have a target for the last few years of 700 gigawatt hours in primary energy a year. And that target is further split into a residential, an energy poor, and a non-residential sector. For 2021, we are in the process of developing our scheme for the next 10 years. And so we've effectively carried over our targets from 2020. So our scheme is operating this year pretty much the same as it has for the last 7 years, but we will have a new scheme and a new statutory basis in place from the start of next year. So just to give some background, our energy credit management system is the official register of our obligated parties' progress to target. So this is the official database where we track everything, all of the obligated parties, how they get to target. We use that to report to our Department of Energy, who in turn use that information to report against the Article 7 targets. It also feeds into the National Energy and Climate Plan requirements under Article 3. The database records all transactions, so all energy savings that obligated parties have uploaded, but also obligated parties can trade energy savings between each other. And just to clarify, we call an energy credit as one verified kilowatt hour of energy savings. And I will probably use them interchangeably through my talk, but when I say a credit, it means 1 kilowatt hour of a verified energy savings. We also use the database to collect all of SEAI's other energy efficiency programs. So we have a number of programs from large industry to SMEs to quite a lot of domestic programs. All of those in various forms also report against Article 3, but in some cases they also double up as alternative measures under Article 7, so we keep a track of them there. Just some technical details, and I have to say I had to ask our IT guys for this because some of it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but the management system was developed in 2014 for the start of our obligation. We've had 3 major version releases since then, and we're working on a 4th one to bring us into the next phase of the Article 7 implementation. It's based on SQL Server. It's front-ended in .NET and is hosted in Azure, so it's all Microsoft services. It was custom built for us by a software company. And I suppose the main thing to know is that there are 2 types of main users. There are SEI, and we are the administrator of the obligation scheme for the Department of Energy in Ireland. And we have administrator rights, we have user rights, and then there's just reader rights. It's just like read-only access. And then obligated parties. At the start of the scheme, they were called primary energy suppliers. And so you will see the word PES, PES, come up a lot, but really it means that they're obligated parties. Obligated parties, in effect, are the administrator for their account. They can appoint a third-party agency, such as a main counterparty, who would employ operatives to carry out works on their behalf, or quite often their structure is there's the obligated party, and then below them they have what we call a contract counterparty. Now, these are the only users that can upload measures to the system for obligated parties. So the obligated party, the PES user, really only has an oversight of all of their progress from all of their agents. The functionality of the scheme is its main role is to record all of the energy savings that are uploaded by obligated parties and SEI programs, but it also facilitates transfers. So in a sense, we are like the bank. We can exchange credits between obligated parties if they request it. We can also exchange credits between sectors. So an obligated party can move an energy poor credit into a residential credit, and they can move a residential credit into a non-residential credit if they need to meet their targets on a given year. There are also, under legislation, penalties in place if obligated parties don't meet their targets in a particular year. So the system keeps a track of their progress and gives them a real-time account of where they are versus their target at the moment, and what their potential liabilities would be if they don't meet their target. So it calculates buyouts and penalties. Obligated parties can buy out up to 30% of their target in any given year, so the system keeps a track of that as well. So just to have a look at the front screen, I'm going to look at just the SEI side of things at the moment. So the main 2 functions for SEI is we have a user account, but in reality it's a super user account. So on that, we can, as the SEI users, we can actually upload energy savings to the system. We can search all of the history of any obligated party or the whole system. We can search the progress of a participating energy supplier or an obligated party. We can search what agents they use, or we can search who is uploading data to our system. We can look at all of the measures that have been uploaded, and we can also look at who's using the system. On the administration side, we cannot upload energy savings or upload data to the system, but we have all of the admin functions. We can add new energy suppliers or new users. We can create notification messages to say the system is down tomorrow, or remember the target is the end of the year is coming up. We can add measures that obligated parties can use. We can set credit capping rules, and I'll explain that in a minute. We can add new users, and we can do the end of year accounting procedures that we need to do. There's also a whole system of reports in the back end that we can rely on as well. The upload process is simple enough. Under our legislation, obligated parties are required to have a quality management system in place for their obligation. Many of them, the majority at this moment in time, have migrated to ISO 9000 for their quality management system. And so, in theory, obligated parties should not put anything on our system unless they have put it through their own measurement and verification process first and made sure that the quality is there. But even so, our own verification process requires us to be able to dip into what they're doing. So in a sense, an external source from an obligated party, we treat it as an unsecured or an unvalidated source. And it goes into a holding area, a pre-clearance area. And we have a period of time, 6 to 8 weeks, in which we can dive into those, measures or those savings that have been uploaded and carry out our own audits or our own desktop checks and things like that. On the other side, we have SEI programs that are reporting into us. They all also have their own measurement and verification processes, but in a sense, because they come from within our organization, we treat them as already pre-approved or secure. Once something has passed the validation process, it goes into ECMS and it becomes a validated energy savings. And at this point, even though the history of the energy saving is attached, so we know where it came from, how it was delivered, what measures were used to deliver the energy savings, it is also fungible. In other words, it's just an energy credit. So it exists like money. It exists as a kilowatt hour that can also be anonymous and traded between parties. The data that we capture, so up to 35 unique pieces of data are captured per record. And as of probably yesterday, we have over 1 million records on the database. The main pieces that it captures is we capture who's the obligated party, who is the contractor that the obligated party had to carry out the works, and if they exist, who are the subcontractors, so down to the electrician or the plumber level in the case of domestic properties. We capture the measure type, so whether it's a fabric measure or a heating measure, or in industry, whether it's refrigeration or a process or all of those kind of things. We capture the property type if it's in a building, and whether it's a house or an apartment or an office block. We capture the sector, so whether that's residential or non-residential or energy poor. And we also capture the location and a unique property and location identifier for the measure. We capture the size of the energy saving or the credit. We capture when it was completed. And up until recently, that wasn't a big deal. We operated on a linear process, but the new obligation scheme, as many people know, Article 7, is cumulative. And it's important that you capture when the measure was completed and when it started to deliver savings. Because quite often our obligated parties might load a measure in February or March of, say, 2022, but it was completed in December of 2021. So we want to capture the year. It also captures the accounting period, and we have, again, as we know, we can't carry over savings from the first period to the second period. So at the moment, we're actually operating 2 periods, one 2014 to 2020, which can still receive some savings because we don't close out the year yet, and then a brand new period from 2021 to 2030. A typical measure, and there's a lot of information here, but the ones I want to show is we know whether it was uploaded by an obligated party or whether it was sent across by ourselves or whether it was a transaction between 2 obligated parties, when the work was created on the system, when it was completed, what year it should go into, what kind of program type it goes into, what in this case is a house, and what type of measure, in this case it's heating controls for a system. A customer reference, and this is so the obligated parties can tie it back to their own system. If they have a project identifier, sometimes they also have a project name, the amount of energy savings that are applied, who the energy supplier is, who carried out the work. I blanked out some of these. Sometimes they put in who the homeowner is or where their addresses are, and we also capture a unique postal code location. And even on this screen, we have some things. I can select this measure or the whole batch of measures for inspection that kicks in our M&V process. If I'm not happy with it, I can cancel the notification, so delete it off the system, or I can make it a duplicate. So I can say something similar is already on the system. Also part of the functionality, data entry is automatic from SEI programs, and there are a number of APIs that allow SEI programs and some external programs to liaise directly with the ECMS. It's batch uploads by obligated parties. They can upload a number of measures at once or measures one by one, so they can have a manual upload. And again, this is just an indication of how you would put a manual upload. So you would say who the obligated party is, who the contractor is, what type of program it is, whether it's a grant program or a non-grant program, and if it's a grant program, what kind of grant program, the sector, residential, energy poor, or non-residential. And then there's some basic measures information, when the date was completed, the type of measure, the unique meter read if it's available, a customer reference, whether it's a public sector building or not, the dwelling type, who the contractor is, and the energy credits. Now, many of our domestic measures are deemed credits, so there's one energy saving allocated to each type of measure, and so that makes the process a lot simpler. Our non-residential, though, are fully measured and verified, and so there's a lot of calculations in the background before they can upload the final energy saving. The ECMS also checks the validation of credit, so it checks to see if the property exists before. It checks to see if that measure has been up on the system before, so that means we can't double count measures. It applies credit caps. So, for example, there is a separate saving for cavity wall fill and a separate saving for external wall insulation. But you might do one or both, but if you do both, you won't get the sum of the two. It will be capped at a reasonable measure. So, and it allows for us to select measures or batches of measures for further audit. And so I'm just to speed on a bit, where it allows us to report progress to targets by the obligated parties, by the sector or by the program. It allows us to identify errors and fix them. It produces our annual reports for reporting to the department and into Europe. It calculates penalties and buyouts. There's a whole functionality about searching. So again, this is the kind of return. Anything that comes back in blue is uncleared. So that means we are able to select that for inspection or validation. And again, so we can look at it in more detail. It tells us what the measure type is. It tells us that it belongs to heating systems. It's under the subcategory of a boiler. It also tells us if there were credit caps applied. So the one change we're going to have in the next season is that we're also going to tie it into our building energy rating, which is the national methodology for energy performance. And we will require a pre and a post building energy rating for all measures. And ultimately, an obligated party would just be able to tell us the property identifier, and we would be able to interrogate our building energy rating system to see what was done and to automatically calculate what the uplift is, but that's a work in progress. Thank you for your attention. I hand back now to Dario.
Thank you very much, Joe. Really interesting. Now we move to UK with two speakers, Angela Gracie-Roger and James Wakelin. So the floor is yours. And
good morning. Thank you very much for having us today. I'm just making sure I can share my screen. Can you let me know if you can see the presentation now?
yeah.
That's great. So thank you very much. My name is Angela Gracie-Roger and I'm the Programme Manager here in the Energy Saving Trust in Northern Ireland. I'm actually co-hosting with my colleague James, who's our analytics and insight consultant. And James works very closely with us on the IT tool that we use in our programme here in Northern Ireland. So I'm just going to introduce the programme really and give you an idea of what this programme is. It's the Northern Ireland Sustainable Energy Programme, and that's an 8 million fund on an annual basis collected through electricity from all electricity customers in Northern Ireland, and that's domestic as well as commercial customers. The money is actually ring-fenced primarily for what we call priority customers, and that's vulnerable customers, vulnerable to fuel poverty, for example. And then 20% is available for non-priority customers, and that will include those in the domestic sector as well as in the commercial sector. So businesses and small to medium enterprises can bid in for that funding. In general terms, NICEP, that we abbreviate to, has been running from 2008 in Northern Ireland, so it's a long-standing programme here. And the main objectives, as you'll see on the screen, are efficiency in the use of energy, the socially and environmentally sustainable long-term energy supply, and of course best value to customers. And as it's ring-fenced for priority customers, that due regard to vulnerable customers is very key to our programme. What we do, so we administer this programme on behalf of the utility regulator in Northern Ireland. And our role is kind of vast and ranging. So we assess those who want to come in and bid in for the programme. So we call those our primary bidders. And actually, what I should say is that NICEP is not an obligatory scheme. It's actually an incentivized scheme where primary bidders can earn incentives if they achieve their targets at the end of the year. So they will get extra payments for that. The organisations have to apply to become a primary bidder, and that will be those who are licensed suppliers in Northern Ireland, so our energy suppliers, but also it can be those in the insulation industry. So we have manufacturers of insulation product who are primary bidders, and we also have other organisations like social enterprises that come through and want to become a primary bidder as well. We developed many years ago, and we update annually, the framework document for NICEP, and the framework document lays out all of the rules around delivering schemes on the ground. We assess all of the bids that come into us on an annual basis. So primary bidders must come in, submit a scheme submission to apply for funding every year out of that £8 million. We manage the in-year in-house process of primary bidders, so they have to report to us on what they're achieving on the ground. We have to check, like other schemes have mentioned, the verification of documentation in order to carry out payment processing. So we only pay out on completed work, for example, and those primary bidders must show us all the evidence to show us what's been completed. We evaluate and we audit schemes annually to ensure that all of the carbon savings and energy calculations, which we'll talk a wee bit more about after, are genuine and true, and that we can stand over all of the energy savings that are delivered. We have developed, again, the scheme submission spreadsheet that primary bidders must use to submit their bids. And that spreadsheet captures the lifetime energy and carbon savings, the cost effectiveness of their schemes, and the gross customer benefits available. And those are really key. And James will talk about the tool that we use that helps us outline all of those savings. And when primary bidders put in their bids, they use this spreadsheet, but actually they have to use it again on outturn savings to get the actual data. So bids are always based on assumptions that primary bidders will be making, and then the outturn actual savings are captured at the end of the year. And that's how we report to the Energy Efficiency Directive. So all of the data from NICEP is reported to through UK government for the EED. I've just got an example in here about some of the outturn savings that I've just mentioned. So from 1920, which was our last annual report that we produced, we spent 6.9 million of the 8 million. COVID started at the end of that year, which is why we had a bit of a drop towards the end of that financial year where COVID had an impact on the scheme. But 6.9 million was spent on measures across the board. You'll see the majority is in the priority sector, actually 6.5 million almost in the priority sector, and then the remaining in the non-priority sector. Up on the screen, you'll see a list of the measures that's been installed across all of these schemes. And within that 19-20 year, we actually had 22 schemes delivered, and that was across 9 different primary bidders. And in the priority side, you'll see there was a range of measures installed across all of those schemes for vulnerable customers, over 18,000 measures installed. And in the non-priority side, mostly LEDs is some of the prominent schemes there for commercial enterprises, but there's a range of other measures installed through the non-priority measures as well. That just gives you a bit of a flavour of what's being delivered on the ground. So the outturn savings from that year, so whilst James will talk about the spreadsheet in a minute that captured these savings, this is what we report on annually. So we have the lifetime energy savings in gigawatt hours, and the carbon saved at 46 tonnes and 46,000 tonnes, the gross customer benefits achieved, and then the incentives earned from primary bidders. So as I said, it's an incentivised scheme. So there was £28,000 worth of incentives earned by primary bidders in that 1 year. And that's across the different primary bidders. So James is going to talk a little bit about Dynamic Engine and our IT tool that helps us with NICEP and how these primary bidders achieve and show us the energy savings that they've delivered.
Thank you, Angela. So the NICEP scheme process uses two kind of IT tools. So just to go through the process, it might make more sense. So as a primary bidder, they initially register with the scheme. They then bid for funding using the scheme submission spreadsheet, and that links into one of the tools. The funding is awarded according to estimated cost effectiveness, which the spreadsheet and the dynamic engine calculate. Then the primary bidder goes through the delivery stage, every month they submit monthly installation data of what actually happened, and this is how this data is collected throughout the whole year, which then ends up being reviewed in total to find out what the impact is for the scheme, for their schemes, and the whole year as a total, as Angela just went through. And every month their funding that they bidded for is actually released based on the actual things they did. But on those two stages, you can see the dashed line, it goes straight to the scheme submission spreadsheet. And this is actually an Excel-based tool, which is sent out to all bidders, and it allows them to select the type of measures that they want to install for a particular scheme, and that could be installation based, it could be heating system upgrade based as well as insulation, and it can be non-domestic measures such as variable speed compressors or drives. Renewables can be in there, although it is less common, but I think there's going to be more coming up in the future. The tool allows them to initially in the bidding stage to kind of estimate what they think they're going to target within that year. So we allow them to enter, say, the number of loft insulation or cavity walls they're going to target, and the tool itself will predict the savings based on the most common installations that happen. So it would use the national Northern Irish Housing Survey to work out, okay, well, loft insulation goes into semi-detached homes that are all oil heated, so that's what the assumption or the estimation of impact will be based on. Then in the post review, when we actually know what they did, using the data that they submitted every month, we can actually go back into the same scheme submission spreadsheet, which they use initially to estimate their impact, and actually refine it and input the actual details, the house type, the actual bedroom numbers, the actual number of installations that happened, the fuel types of the buildings that went in. They submit the documentation so they can verify, for instance, if the heat pump was installed according to the specifications that we think would create a customer benefit and a emission saving. And so this spreadsheet is a good interface between us and the primary bidders. Excel was used because it keeps costs down. We actually need to change it quite a lot every year because different measures and different policies come in. If it was a portal-based tool, I think that would push up quite a lot of development costs. And Excel for us gives maximum flexibility. And also we're dealing with installers and companies which are small and medium who are very familiar with Excel and are much more probably comfortable using that rather than maybe a portal-based system. The dynamic engine is the thing that generates all the savings that go into the scheme submission spreadsheet, and that is a larger tool which EST or Energy Saving Trust uses not only for NICEP but for multiple other things. It is a housing model, domestic housing model, that generates bespoke savings, advice, builds scenarios for different domestic buildings that allows us to compare the energy consumption, the emissions, and the financial running costs of domestic buildings. It is based off of the UK Standard Assessment Procedure, which is the methodology that we use to assess heat loss rates of domestic buildings, and it's all the same methodology that's used to generate the energy performance certificates for buildings. But what we did is we took that and we built upon it. So the Standard Assessment Procedure, or SAP, has so many assumptions. It's got heat loss rates for everything, and that's quite impractical if you want to use it multiple times. So on top of that, we built an inference engine. So it will allow a user, it could be an advisor or could be us, to put in a limited number of parameters such as age or house type and fuel type, and then the inference engine will make assumptions to fill in the gaps. So it will fill in what the most probable wall heat loss rate or wall type would be, or how much insulation it would have based on building regulations. It's all got it built in there. And then it will allow us to output what the most or estimate the most probable energy consumption for that type of building. For NICEP, we actually use an internal interface called the dynamic editor, and that allows us much more detailed flexibility in what we can input. So what I did is, for every measure NICEP allows bidders to install, I modeled 1 to 6 bedroom houses, 9 different house types. I think there's 5 different fuel types for every measure, so that out of the post review, whatever building the installers are actually installed into, we could actually get a more bespoke saving. That's all modeled within the dynamic engine, because it allows us to create scenarios. So for every one scenario, it could be a 1-bedroom flat which is all heated, we have a corresponding scenario that is the pre and post installation. So one would have no installation, and then the second one would have installation, and then you do a simple one minus the other to come up with a saving. It's quite a lot of work, but we do it on a batch basis. So we have multiple rows, and we do this update every year. It actually feeds into a lot of our EST's general savings as well, but we just use different parameters and inputs depending on the representations. So obviously for Northern Ireland, we use Northern Ireland parameters to make sure it's as representative as possible. What else have I said? So the flexibility of the dynamic engine is really useful to us because we use it in multiple schemes, and it allows us to actually do quite bespoke savings. We had to lock it down a bit with NICEP because obviously you can't model every iteration of every measure possible. So, but we did want to open it up as much as possible and give as many different types of savings, so it captures the impact as closely as we can. And in terms of security, what we tend to do is within the spreadsheet, we lock it down. We make sure that the backend can't actually be accessed with VBA code and macros. But even if it can, the numbers actually change every year. So they are updated constantly, and it means that we can also make sure that the data is always up to date.
Thank you very much. If there's any questions, we'd be happy to discuss at the end about NICEP, or our contact details are on the screen if you want to get in touch in future.
Okay, thank you very much. And of course, there are many questions now, and we will ask them to all speakers because more or less they are of interest for everybody, I think. And let's move on towards the last presentation, last case study with Livio De Chicchis from Italy. Please, Livio.
Thank you, Dario. Good morning, everybody. I'm Livio De Chicchis, and I work for the Italian Federation for Energy Efficiency as a energy policy analyst. In the next minutes, I would like to say some words about the platform for the submission of white certificate projects. White certificate scheme, that is the obligation scheme actually in force in Italy, and it is also the main energy efficiency incentive available for to incentivize the energy efficiency and the production of energy from renewable sources. The scheme is managed by the GSE, is Gestore dei Servizi Energetici, which is the subject that manages most of the incentives and of the energy services in force in Italy. And the submission of the white certificate projects has to be done through a portal, a platform managed by the GSE itself. The submission processes is composed by two main steps. The first is the accreditation of the organization or of the proponent on the portal. Then once I've done the first accreditation form, in the second step, the proponent can submit the project. So there are these two main steps. Regarding the submission of the project, so going into the submission of the energy efficiency measures implemented, there are 6 subsequential steps, as you can see in the scheme reported in the slide. Let's begin with a general description of the intervention, of the measures that compose the project. Then a description of the sites involved involved by the intervention has to be made, the site or the sites if there is a measure that is implemented in more than one site. A description also of the components of the project, the equipment and so on that constitute the project. Contextually with the description of the components, also the energy efficiency meters and in general the measuring equipment has to be described through within the portal. Then the setup of the project, the configuration both ex ante and ex post, the intervention is realized. And finally, a detailed report of the measures carried out. This is because white certificate scheme is a really evidence-based mechanism. So there are strict measurement requirements, and a consequence of this is that all the measures and all the features of the meters used has to be reported in detail within the proposal, so through the energy efficiency platform. In the specific, the data that have to be uploaded, some of the data, it's not an exhaustive list, but some of the data that has to be uploaded on the portal are, of course, a general project descriptions with the modification that occur between the ex ante and ex post phase. The definition of MMV program, measurement and verification program, according to what I said a few words ago. So the strict requirement of measure properly of the scheme implies that all the MMV program has to be reported within the project. So for example, the metered energy consumption, but also the metered variables has to be registered. All the information about the installed meters has to be made available in the portal. The algorithm for the calculation of the energy savings and any adjustments between the ex ante and ex post phase. For the ex ante evaluation and ex ante consumption evaluation, at least 12 months of energy consumption has to be registered of the ex ante period before the realization of the energy efficiency measure. So all the 12-month measures has to be reported on the platform, but also contextually to the reporting of the energy consumption, also a reporting of the energy efficiency of the variables that has an impact on the energy efficiency consumption. So the GSE is able to evaluate the normalization of the energy consumption before and ex post the intervention. Then very important, through the platform has to be uploaded the information and the documentation about the startup date of the project, because with the actual regulation, the project has to be started after the proposal is presented to GSE. So it's important to demonstrate both in the proposal but also in the first request of certification. So the first proposal, the first documents after the project has been implemented, which was the effective startup date, and the documentation to demonstrate it has to be provided through the platform. Then also other information has to be made available. For example, information about the proponent, so the requirements that a proponent has to have to present, to assess the scheme and to present the project. Information about the verification of the meters in terms, for example, of accuracy and of continuity in the registration of the data, and also data about the cumulability of the white certificates with any other incentive. So there are requirements about the cumulability, and the proponent has to declare through the platform if he has already received some other incentives for the same project in the past, so that the cumulability can be evaluated by the GSE. This concerns the proposal phase, so before the intervention has been realized. After, through the platform, has to be submitted information about the effective energy savings that have been registered. So the measurement of the ex post energy consumption, and consequently the energy savings being compared with the ex ante data already implemented in the platform in the proposal form. This is just an example with some screenshot of the report of the measurement program. So in the ex ante scenario, for example. So as you can see in the left screenshot, each block represents a parameter metered. So I told that all the measurements have to be provided within the project, and each parameter has to be metered with a dedicated tool, with a dedicated equipment. So as you can see, each block represents a parameter metered, and for each parameter metered, a detailed description has to be made of the parameters metered, but also of the meter. For example, in terms of model of the meter, accuracy of the meter, and any eventually note that can affect the measurement of the consumption. As I think all the tools that we have seen, but that are available in each country. Also, the Italy platform has pros and cons, trying to underline some strengths of the white certificate platform. Of course, the portal is able to host a high amount of data. This is due both to the requirements, to the regulation of the mechanism that oblige the proponent to provide a large amount of data, but also it's possible thanks to the design of the platform. So this is able to able to host this great amount, this great variety of data. And the data collected through this MMV has the benefits to, for example, improve the project quality, to really qualify operator, in particular ESCOs, or in general the proponents, and to provide many valuable data both to the managing authorities but also to the stakeholders. And one example that I want to highlight to stress of this usage of the data implemented in the platform comes from the EU project EU Mercy. It's a ended up some years ago, but if you go on the website, you can still find the database that has been implemented within the project. This database contains aggregate data deriving from real implementation of energy efficiency project in industry. And at least in Italy, making this database has been possible thanks to the data extracted from the white certificate platform. So this is an example of usage of effective usage of the data contained in the platform to create statistics and a really database. Of course, this was referred to the platform that was in force with the previous regulation of the mechanism. Now, from 2017 on, a new decree was when is regulating the scheme, so the platform has been updated, of course, to the new regulation. And in this context, speaking about some issues of the actual platform, it can host a large amount of data, but not the extraction, the indexing of the data with the actual platform is not so immediate, because if we want to build some statistics, some scenarios in an aggregate way, some effort is required, because there are from one side a large number, a large entity of data, but the aggregation of them according to how it was designed, the platform, the actual platform, is not so easy. So one takeaway, one recommendation that I want to underline is to build or use in general a platform that really manages the data in an effective way. This is a concept that has already been told in the previous intervention, in the introductory intervention, but I want to conclude coming back to the beginning, so in a sort of closure of the ring. I want to underline the importance to build a platform that that allows to manage the data in an effective way. And of course, this is a thing that has been considered since the designing of the project, because in my opinion, then coming back is not so easy and is not so cost effective. So it's key, it's really important to think to what we will, to what we want to the scope of the platform since the designing, since the beginning of the designing of the platform itself. So I thank you for your attention, and I leave the floor to the discussion, remaining at disposal, of course, for any questions.
Thank you very much, Livio. Okay, so we completed the review of these 5 case studies, and we are also time, and that's a nice discovery. I kindly ask all the speakers to activate their webcam so that we can dive into the discussion. There are 5 questions and another one which I'm going to answer first, that is about the availability of the presentations. So yes, as I said at the beginning, the presentations and the recording will be available on our website, ENSMOV.eu, in the next days. So thank you again to our speakers, and let's proceed with the questions. So the first 2 questions are related, so I will run them together. So the design of IT tools appears to be fundamental to ensure their effectiveness and usability over the years. Is it really possible to correct design flaws or to extensively improve the platforms afterwards? And related to that, how do you manage the need for flexibility? It has to accommodate the changes in the regulations or in the eligible energy efficiency measures or active parties but of course means okay, the design is important and we can have issue both because there are flaws or bugs in the design, or because the regulation changed. That happens in any case. So what's your view on that? I'll start with Elizabeth. She's okay.
I think flexibility is very much a matter of how or what kind of tool you use. Of course, for example, using spreadsheets like just presented, those are actually updated quite regularly and are easier to update, while a very complex IT system, not even prepared by and monitoring body itself, but by an external company, will be much harder to adapt. Of course, if, or speaking for Austria, in case there are adaptations needed due to changes in regulation, of course, those will be implemented. But once again, it takes quite some time for the preparation for this. Regarding changes, not necessarily that that have to happen due to flaws that have been made in the design. My experience is that it is possible, but like I already said, if it's just a minor thing and this can actually be a missing button, this will actually take a lot of time, a lot of additional resources, both by programming time as well as costs.
Yeah, of course. Who wants to add something to that?
Yes, I can say that I agree with Elizabeth, and in our case as well, updates should be made in accordance with new regulations, and will be made, but it will take time. So time is an issue, and costs, of course.
Yeah.
I have to agree as well, because we use Excel obviously for the maximum flexibility, but for the dynamic engine that we have also has many bespoke interfaces that are kind of platform portal kind of based, and to get that changed is very expensive and time consuming. It would not be appropriate for the scheme that we're currently.
Yeah, also because we are working with database, and in some of examples you shared, there were a lot of information included in the database, and I think the more information there is, the more you can automate the database. For example, we see some nice example, but of course that means that changes are more difficult to introduce. And other comments on that? If not,
just
yeah.
It's just important that you have a good idea of what you want to do, that you plan out, and many of the speakers actually touched on that, good planning from the start. We're dealing with a 10-year program now, so it's going to be hard to capture everything, but as long as you have a good idea of the basic functionality you need it to do. Is it just a register of energy savings? Is it also an MMV tool? They add to the complexity, so just to be clear on what you need.
Okay. The other question is about if it is better to reason on one platform for all the measures, so a centralized platform, or one platform for each of them. The measure here are policy measure, I think. Of course, this is important when there are many differences in the different policies. And what did you do in your countries? And what do you think about that? Volunteers?
I think you can have different platforms, but they need to be captured ultimately in one central database for reporting against both Article 3 and Article 7. And so you might have a different way of monitoring and evaluating public sector savings, for example, or other policy measures, but it helps to bring them into one database, so at least then you can check for duplication and additionality and things like that.
Yeah, we have something like that in Italy, for example, when all the policy measures that are managed by GSE, so for energy efficiency, renewables, etc., are managed under one big platform. And of course, there are different IT tools for each of the measures that are, of course, really different one from the other. Any other comment on that?
I mean, for Austria, definitely all obligated parties are reporting in our application. Also, the federal provinces reporting mostly about housing schemes are by now online reporting in our database. It's hard to get the public authorities to actually use the interface, because those programs are older, in most cases older than the Energy Efficiency Act. So I think at some point you have to find an agreement on how they will report the data, at least in an aggregated version, because for reporting to the Commission, it is definitely easier if you have all the savings in one database, in one report, which you can then automate via Excel.
Okay.
Or other tools.
So I think more or less you all agree that centralized platform helps in monitoring, evaluation, and so on, even if, of course, different policies needs different particular tools for introducing the data, etc. Another question is about the interface. Does the interface make it possible for users to link their own information system with your IT tool to make it easier for them to enter their data in the platform? This is something that, of course, it's nice, but I don't know how many times it's possible to use this approach in the practical cases.
We have that in our system. We have an API. So we because it's this SQL database, we know the format of data that we need. We haven't opened it up to obligated parties, but it is something we will look at for the next phase. But in theory, their systems could liaise directly with us and upload their measures via the API.
Okay. I think in many cases, instead, the managing agency creates its platform, and then it's up to the, let's say, proponents to adapt their own system to match it, if possible. Of course, it's not an easy task, because also the user had a lot of different IT platforms in use in their companies. So, but I don't know if it's something that will become more useful in time. Last question: do you have in-house IT experts to help you preparing the specifications for the IT system? Any difficulty in discussing the functionalities, possibility of updates, etc.? This, of course, is due to the fact many of us witnesses the difficulties that there are when you put together the technicalities of IT experts with your own technicalities. So what do you think about that?
I mean, at EST, we have a working group. So we generally, our policy is to involve IT from the start, project inception and development. And ever since then, for Dynamic Engine, our platform, they meet very regularly with the project managers, them, and as well as external developers, so that they're always up to date. And if you ever want more from them, you just join these meetings. So there's always a continual conversation, and I think that's the best it's used. I think historically the difficulties came when they were involved in like phase 3, many like months down the line, when really they should have been involved from the start.
Okay. Our views on that?
I think first you need people who are really, really familiar with everything on a legal matter of the ED, so how to implement it, to do know every detail. And then it's more about, I mean, with us not being the authority who is preparing it, but handing this to another company, this makes communication a little bit harder, because actually it was me and my colleague translating all the requirements into a language that programmers could use, that in order to make it, or to transform it into a language that a machine will use. So it was a two-step translation process, more or less. So yeah, this makes it kind of hard. I think you should have people who are both familiar with EED implementation, as well as at least a basic concept on how databases work in place for doing this. Otherwise, there will just be miscommunication, and even in that cases, or even if you have such people, you still have to check very carefully, because something that it might be entirely clear to you, of course, is not clear to the people programming or preparing your application.
Okay. I also think that in our policies in Italy, we had more or less the same mixed approach. So we have both internal IT experts and, of course, when you design and implement for the first time the IT2, the platform, you request, of course, the intervention of external companies. And this is to ensure the main effective mix, I think, on that. There is the last question that arrived a few moments ago for Livio. I don't know, and it's specific for Livio. How the platform integrates non-routine events and adjustments with IP MVP application guidelines?
Yeah, this is a good question. The adjustments and the non-routine variables are taken into account through the annual reporting of the energy consumption, of the energy saving. So considering 12 months of energy consumption and of the variables that affect the energy consumption, we are able to keep track of the modification of the non-routine changes that occur to the intervention. This approach is in line with the IPMVP, with the option B of the IPMVP. Actually, the protocol, the IPMVP protocol, is not mandatory, but can be a possibility to present the project. We are also pushing the application on of this protocol, since it can be a really effective tool to demonstrate the effective savings. So it's a really proper approach of the measurement amplification, but actually it's not mandatory to present the project, but the consistency of the measures and of the adjustment and of the variables is demonstrated through the annual reporting of the energy savings and of the energy consumption of the ex ante situation.
Okay, and by the way, if you're interested in the everlasting question, if it is better to use simplified approaches like standardized measures, dimmed savings, or meter savings, or something in between, there has been an interesting webinar organized by ENSMOV last December, and you can find the recordings and the presentations on our website. Okay, there are no other questions. I don't know if speakers want to add something. No, so in that case, just thank you all speakers for your availability, participants and attendance, and just remind you that you will find recording and presentation on our website. So stay in touch with us and enjoy this summer with the pandemic still going on, and not only the pandemic, thinking of Germany and all the issues they had with climate change. So have a nice day and see you next time in another ENSMOV event. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.